We acknowledge the Ancient Ones, the Greater Shamanic Council of Light, Hermes, both Trismegistus and Seshet, Lady of the Measuring Cord, as above so below, as within so without. We acknowledge Imhotep, Architect of the Cosmos. May the earth be the mirror of heaven. We acknowledge the Sacred Order of the Magi, and all throughout history who knew, like now, a turning of the ages. We acknowledge the Master Builders of Göbekli Tepe and the Great Shining Ones at Kalash, the courage and knowledge of the Polynesian wayfinders traversing the great oceans. We acknowledge the prophetic traditions of Ezekiel and Daniel, the traditions of Avalon, the Merlin, and the Round Table, the calendric wizardry of the Maya, and the Venus teachings from Mesoamerica, the Jupiter teachings originating in China, and the Vedic lunar mansion traditions, the Babylonian and Sumerian sidereal zodiacs, the brilliant Hellenistic invention of the seasonal zodiac. The Neolithic peoples around the planet, some still today, honoring the sacred connection between the land and the sky. The Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, who created a time of 2,000 years of peace, the builders of Newgrange. My teachers that are not in human form, Mount Shasta, the Grandfather Rock at the Wonderland of Rocks in Joshua Tree, Mount Haleakala on Maui, the Fish Lake Valley, Hierophany, and the sacred landscapes around the planet, the astrosophy of Rudolf Steiner, and the esoteric astrology of DK in the Tibetan, both presaging the shamanic astrology paradigm, and particularly the archetypal visions of C.G. Jung and the cosmology of my mentor, Dane Rajar. For these and more we give thanks.
Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett, here to interview Daniel Giamario, founder of the Shamanic Astrology paradigm, for our fourth, or really the third episode, part 2, a follow-up to the Eclipse episode that we had last time. How you doing, Daniel?
Pretty well. My only challenge here is the continuing problems with technology, internet, and so on, which has delayed this show, and which has changed the nature of the show today. You're talking to me from Metro Manila, outside of Metro Manila, and I'm still over here in South Asia until August, when I will be in Ireland for our Ireland-Scotland Renaissance of the Sacred Feminine Adventure.
It's amazing. I'm just looking at the Manila chart right now. So today is out there. It's Sunday, May 15th at about 12:50 p.m. It's exactly midday. The sun just hit the midheaven. And I'm in Washington, D.C. I guess it just turned May 15th for me, too. It's about, it's just about midnight out here. So I'm hanging out and checking out these strange monuments and temples, and going to give a presentation about them soon. And we're going to do a bit of an eclipse recap today, right, Daniel?
Indeed, but I did want to mention, since you brought up the Manila chart, I think it does connect in some ways what I was talking about during the pre-eclipse show, having to do with events in South Asia and Southeast Asia, which I'm reminded of this because the moon has just moved into conjunction with Jupiter, the North Node. So Moon, Jupiter, North Node in conjunction. There's been such an amazing situation here in the Philippines. They just had an election, and the people that won all have something really, really strong in Virgo. Pretty much it was an entire Virgo election over here. That's what this reminded me of. But the events here in the Philippines, I believe, is very much connected to this series of eclipses all the way back to the one in 1962. And the plot even thickens more when we look at the chart of the Philippines in comparison with the chart of the United States. So it's a great deal of material there for inquiry and research having to do with how the U.S. and the Philippines and also the U.S. and Indonesia have been very strange bedfellows for a very long period of time, usually in not a good way for the local people, actually. But that's just a whole other story. I've been tracking this big time ever since this eclipse.
Interesting. And is there a birth time that you have for Philippines? Or maybe I'll just find that online and put the chart up here and I can put it with the U.S. chart.
Well, yeah, yes. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon on June 12th, 1898.
Got it. And then which chart do you prefer for the U.S.? Do you use Rudjar's Sagittarius rising chart?
I do, actually, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll show those both those charts here, and we'll let the viewer make some of their own interpretations, and maybe we can journey into that sometime.
Sorry, Brett. There's more research that could be done on the Indonesian charts, and it's just basically that larger view that I have, that the area of the Earth that the eclipse paints over, like a paintbrush going over a certain area, has profound implications for the current time, but it also takes us way back in history, which is why I call that one in South Asia, in Indonesia, Sulawesi, to be the Sundaland eclipse. We'll have a whole show on that coming up about the pyramids and the megaliths of Indonesia. But actually, I probably should mention here that I did not make it to the eclipse. As excited as I was about going down there to see it, it turned out that it was just too difficult to get down there. And it was fairly last-minute stuff that happened, but we did not go. So I saw about a 60% one here in Manila, rather than going down to the eclipse in Sulawesi. But we were including, as part of this video, some footage of the marvelous and magical experience the people in Sulawesi and other parts of Indonesia had for this particular eclipse.
Yeah, they had pretty much perfect weather. I mean, there was that one shot of the eclipse setting, right? It was like a eclipse set over the ocean with just the ring of fire around the black disc. That was, I think, maybe the most beautiful eclipse shot that I've seen ever, I think.
Well, the ones in Indonesia, those are happening in the morning. So you all...
Oh, so it was, sorry, so it was sunrise.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that was a mistake I had made on our last recording, too, was talking about that eclipse path going down, where actually it was going up, because I was seeing the world spin the wrong way. Yeah, and it's funny, too, because one of the prayers that I was speaking at our eclipse ceremony in Hawaii was sending it over there to Indonesia with love, but it was actually coming towards us, right? But,
exactly, yeah. You were at the very end of it. Well, right there in the Sunda Strait is where it was rising, and that's that area kind of in between, or in the connecting area between Sumatra and Java, which is where it started. And then it went over Borneo, and then across Sulawesi, and then out through Micronesia, and eventually where you were you in the ocean for it?
Yeah, we were at Kealakekua Bay on Big Island of Hawaii, and we got really good weather. The weather was beautiful in the morning, and then these clouds came in, and it looked like it was going to totally shut down, and I was sending messages around of where is clear on the island, and then it just opened up just enough for us and just kind of made a window for the eclipse, and we had a perfect view of it. It was wonderful. We had about, I think, 15 and then up to 25, 30 people on the beach all laying down with eclipse glasses on or sitting in meditation and just watching the eclipse for a couple hours. It was really a lovely experience, and the dolphins came to play with us at some point, and it was everything I was hoping for.
Beautiful.
And there was a point where I went, we were pretty close to a heiau, and so I went to leave an offering during the eclipse, and I walked over, and there was a brother and sister hanging out. They were probably 9 and 10 years old, something around there. And I gave them a pair of eclipse glasses, and I said, look. And I said, look at the sun. And she did, and the girl's like, what's that? And I said, it's the moon. And she put the glasses back on. Look, she says, the moon. And she says, I have to tell everyone. And I said, well, just keep those glasses, and I know how you feel. So it's really cool. I think there was a shamanic astrologer in the making in that moment.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, we have that influence too. Well, actually, if we watch it and then they get to see it, they'll never forget it, and so it becomes part of their lives for the future.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the idea, and this is obviously an episode for another time, but of the eclipse coming here to the States in 2017, and just the opportunity that people will have to tune in. And I think we're even more. I remember when I was in elementary school, we went out and watched an eclipse and did a science project to project it and all that stuff. But I feel like people are getting more and more interested, and maybe that's just because I'm more and more interested myself and surrounding myself by these people. But it's really lovely to see how much is being posted about astronomical and astrological happenings online.
Well, and Brett, the thing that's so exciting to me about it is that it's really part of the evolving view that we have in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which is to reframe the way the ancient people would have looked at it in a positive, negative, dualistic approach, and to actually now, as many, many, many more people are watching it and seeing the wondrous experience they can have visually and also emotionally and even spiritually with it, it's a reframing of that old view that there's something negative or scary about these events. And by holding space and being present for them, we watch the magic unfold rather than being in some kind of grip of superstitious fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you just have to wonder when the fear was born. I mean, you look at some of these old translations like the death of the king during the eclipse. Well, so many people actually saw the sun as the king. So when the sun gets knocked out, isn't that the death of the king? And is that a bad thing, or is that something you go celebrate, right? It's like the whole idea, too, of like the 3 days of darkness. Well, the moon has 3 days of darkness every month, right? And it feels to me that somebody looked at these old writings and just freaked out with their translations of what that meant, having no idea who wrote it down in the first place. And the superstition was born maybe when it really wasn't that way historically. We don't really know.
And also that a great deal of it has to do with who won and who lost. I mean, if the eclipse means the overthrow of the king, well, that's good news for those who overthrew the king.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to some people where it's just like, oh, the eclipse is coming, I'm going to go, like, hide from it, and I just don't understand why. I mean, it's such a incredible thing to connect to see with your eyes every time. It's just so surprising to me and so magical. And really helps us understand where we are in the workings of our neighborhood, of the cosmos.
But speaking of the 2017 one, we are in the school planning to have at least 3 groups. It could spread to more than that. There'll be a group along the path at Isis Cove in North Carolina. There'll be a group in Kansas City, and then some of us are thinking of having kind of a what do you call it? A nomadic one somewhere in the Snake River Canyon area. Not necessarily in a hotel or something at all, but like being mobile to be able to go down the road wherever you need to in order to follow where it's going to be clear. So we're going to be creating these events all over the country in 2017.
Well, maybe by then we can get enough people involved, because I think it moves all the way from South Carolina on the rise in the east and then curves up through St. Louis and Idaho and kind of finishes and sets in the Oregon coast as far as the total eclipse goes, right?
You got it backwards again. So it starts in Oregon and ends in South Carolina.
Oh, right, because we see it at like 10-something in the morning, and that's going to be their 1 o'clock. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to have a lot to figure out. But either way, I'm thinking we should set up like a relay race around the whole continent.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, the other reason why I went to Hawaii, actually what really brought me out there was to get there for the vernal equinox this year, which is a surprisingly early equinox, right on March 19th. And I saw that the eclipse would be partially visible there, so I thought it would be smart to go out a little bit earlier. But when I had been in Hawaii on the island of Maui last, which was in November of 2015, I found this place called Oluwalu. I didn't find it. It's a known petroglyph site, although it's not really promoted so much anymore because some idiots, too many, have decided to add their own modern petroglyphs to the wall. But I noticed when I saw a moonrise there, because it was an equinox moonrise, the moon was at 29 degrees Pisces, and it rose right over the central column of the petroglyphs, like the main channel of their markings. And I realized then that this was most likely a calendar to track the solstices and the equinox. And then when you climb up on top of the mill or the butte, there's 3 kind of marker stones that I figured would also be solstice and equinox stones. And I'll put up some pictures here about this. I mean, the first thing that was such a blessing, the night before the equinox in Hawaii and Maui, I gave a talk, and when I came outside, I brought some people out to see the planets, and there was this incredible moonbow, and I'll put this picture up right here. And with the fishhook, which is what they call Scorpius in Hawaii, because it rises vertically, and it's like the fishhook that Maui used to fish the islands out of the ocean. But Mars and Saturn and the hook were all together in front of this incredible moonbow that was cast by a Leo moon. And the next day I went down to Alualu, and there was a rainbow, a sun rainbow in that same Leo moon. In the east, it was just gorgeous, and I looked and checked out the sunset alignments that night, and I don't think I'm right about these marker stones, but it seems like actually from up there, the entire island of Lanai would work like this to track the solar season. But the next day, I went and watched the sun rise on that site, and it's definitely rising right over this channel. So that's the picture you're seeing here. And I think I'm just sharing this because, first of all, this is like such a great gift that Daniel at the Shamanic Astrology School has brought to me, which is to kind of open my eyes when I'm looking around these old sites that I've been so attracted to and see how there's so many of these different astronomical alignments, and probably something for another time. But if you have an astronomical alignment to the summer solstice, for example, you don't have to be there on summer solstice to see it. You just have to know that in our time that the summer solstice sunrise rises on Orion's club. So if you know that in the sky and any time of the year, well, not quite any time of the year, but most of the year, you'll be able to see Orion rise and you'll see that club alignment. So that's just something when you're out touring around some of these sacred sites and stone circles and something, just to know that they're astronomically aligned. And I think as we move further, Daniel will share some of his experience and some of his wisdom of how you can notice at this places, very special places around the world where this happens, and also how you can create your own, stone circles and these kinds of things to track the season. And Daniel, you're going later this year to some of your favorite stone circles where archaeoastronomy was utilized, right?
Probably the most important original initiation I had to bring me into this view of the sky and the land and astronomy and astrology was in Callanish on the island of Lewis, that as far back as 1984. And I will be going back for my 11th visit, taking a group at the end of August, early September, coming up. We're going to actually do a whole show on the wonders of Scotland and Western Ireland and Wiltshire, Stonehenge area, that whole area, coming up here before those events transpire in August. When we're in Ireland, we'll be during that time of that configuration that's coming up that should be pretty startling, which is the Mars-Venus-Antares exact conjunction happening on the 24th of August. And we'll be in the western part of Ireland for that, and then soon after that we'll be back at the great stones of Callanish, the most remarkable stone circle I've ever experienced. It's kind of, some might say, but Daniel, what about Göbekli Tepe? Well, Göbekli Tepe, much older, is pretty amazing, but it doesn't have that same kind of primal feel of like most of it is now under a roof. It's like engaged in an archaeological dig. While at Callanish, you go there, and it's still as wild and powerful and amazing as it ever was. So if anyone out there that really wants to taste the deepest essence of what the ancient mysteries were about, involving the land and the sky and the seasons and the stars and the stones, it's definitely Callanish. And then a close second to me would be the landscape, the old chambered cairns of Western Ireland that were precursors to New Grange. And New Grange are also part of what our trip is going to be. We'll have a whole show on that coming up. But one thing before I wanted to mention to you, Brett, and to our audience here, you talked about seeing the night rainbow. I think I mentioned to you that my favorite book, and according to certain cultural practitioners, the only really authentic book that you can get regarding true Hawaiian traditions, is this book called Tales of the Night Rainbow. And it basically, according to this book, that is the most powerful, auspicious omen that you could ever have happen to you, is to actually be there present for a night rainbow. So, well done, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. It was so incredible for me. I mean, I used to think that a moonbow, when I heard that term, was that, the ring like the moon dogs and the ring that you can get around the moon sometime that reflects the spectrum. And it was actually the last time I was in Maui, I saw a moonbow in the morning. I was really tracking Venus at that time. She was at her height in the east. It was the end of October of 2015, and I got up early in the morning to see Venus, and there was a bit of one, and I was like, oh, that's a moonbow. But this time, and we'll see in this picture, it was just like shockingly cool. And there were 4 of us out there, and we were just, giddy school kids and just laughing and playing, and it was really lovely. So I appreciate hearing the title of that book again from you, Daniel, because I didn't buy it last time you told me, and that's definitely going to happen now. And I can't tell you how many of the books that grace my overstocked bookshelves were recommendations from you, and very gladly so. So Daniel, where can people find out about the Callanish and New Grange and basically the Mysteries of Ireland and Scotland tour?
Well, probably the quickest way would just be to go to the Shamanic Astrology website and look up under events, or if you're getting the Shamanic Astrology newsletter, we always have a link and information about it there. And if you don't get our newsletter, all you have to do is really go to the Shamanic Astrology website, and on the front page, there's a place where you can put your email in. And we send out a free newsletter once or twice a month. And, we're doing this show this way because of continuing technological telecommunication problems to be able to do it like the other shows. We do intend to do another show in a few weeks, which will be the long-awaited Gunung Padang show about Java, and then that will be followed by a Scotland, Ireland, Wiltshire show. But I was also wanted to let you all know what Brett and I are considering having as future shows. 3 that came to mind for me. One was a whole show just on precession and the 26,000-year cycle over time. Secondly, one on the history of the zodiacs, which would be a really good way of seeing how constellational and seasonal, so-called tropical, and the different version of sidereal zodiacs have operated throughout history. And then to also share with you, we can talk about this, riff about this, Brett, is show how you do a synthesis. How can you actually create a framework for establishing a great foundation for astrology or for the next age? One that is not about competing systems, but which is like an integration of the best of all these systems in a way that can really work for the present age. The third show I was considering was one that has to do with the journey of the soul, which is looking at the paradigm on a deeper philosophical and spiritual level about how the moon is the lineage and how we go through different experiences and what is the difference between life purpose and intention, and what are the different versions of enlightenment or self-realization. How does that all tie into the shamanic astrology paradigm and how we look at a birth chart?
Yeah, all those sound so exciting to me, Daniel. Absolutely. And, we're at this time right now where there's a lot of retrograde planets happening. I mean, Jupiter stationed direct last week during the Mercury transit. And we haven't really spoken about the Mercury transit so much, but you certainly cover that in some really wonderful articles. And so some people will itch to say, oh, well, this video is not working right now because Mercury's retrograde, but Daniel and I have had this problem when Mercury's well and direct and moving fast and behind the sun in all sorts of different levels, because Daniel's in Manila and I'm in the States, and this kind of thing is bound to happen. But one thing that I do love, so currently Mercury and Mars and Saturn and Pluto retrograde, although Pluto's retrograde almost half the year. Juno's retrograde too, but there seems to me, just in this content and in this idea of these future episodes of really kind of making sure that we're bringing back like the natural essence of astrology and this kind of astrological look, through the stone circle alignments and stuff like that. And that's what I'm really feeling right now. I've had this call to just kind of slow down and really get my feet on the ground and ask, I think, in new ways. And, how has this been done for thousands and tens of thousands of years, and how can we vision it moving forward? So I'll really look forward to those shows with you, Daniel. And those most likely will be full video shows. So, and the other thing I just wanted to share too, when you're talking about the synthesis of these many astrologies, I'm really in my readings these days, like sharing, I don't know, maybe 30% is getting into the constellational focus, along with the, seasonal signs and the planets and the aspects and all that we typically speak about in astrology. And I really hope that we'll be able to share ideas of how people can create their own hierophany or stone circle or solar pole, or these different kind of very simple ways just to connect to the seasonal transformation. And that reminds me too, just to share that Ireland and Scotland can be very far away to join one of these shamanic astrology excursions, but there will be some in the States in the fall, and one is at a stone circle that Daniel built in New Mexico. So will you tell us about that, Daniel?
Sure. I was living in the Mimbres River Valley area back in the 90s. That's where I was actually living when I first was inspired to write those articles about the Venus and Mars synodic cycle. That's when I was living there. And it turns out that I became friends with a man who was owning this hot springs called Faywood Hot Springs. He and I seem to have gone back many lifetimes, and we decided to collaborate on building a stone circle. I designed it, he built it, and it's there on the top of the hill, right there in between Deming and Silver City. It's a whole longer story about what happened in building it, because we built it with the seasons. So once I found the center point, and then had a sense of how big it would be, we didn't put the stones appropriate to the solstices and equinoxes until the seasons themselves. So we actually put the stones in over a period of about a year and a half, and then finally put in the winter solstice stone and set it exactly as the final one. And so it was all organically built. It's built in the Scotland style, where the stones match the horizon. So the stones are not all exactly the same size. It depends on, from the center stone, where the stone is with the actual features of the land. It was a great joy building that, and it's still there. And it turned out that, unfortunately, the guy who built it, who had the same dream as me, died some years ago. So he's not involved in the project anymore. But we do take groups there as often as we can. And there we have this phenomenal stone circle. It's about the same size as Stonehenge. I mean, not the stones themselves aren't that big, but the diameter of it and the size of it is the same as Stonehenge. I didn't plan it that way. That's just what how the land called it out to have it made.
And that sharing, which you can find probably in the events page as well, right? But it's also going to be a class of the synodic cycles, which is one of the crown jewels of the shamanic astrology paradigm of zooming out, I like to say, out of the frame of the film that is our birth chart and looking at the scene and looking at the film itself and seeing more of these global currents that we're all individually born to participate. It's one of the most amazing entries to see more in the chart. So that would be a wonderful thing for students of all levels of astrology to come out and check out if you want to connect to the land, connect to the sky in an incredible place with dark skies and tap into learning directly from Daniel and Kaylin Castell, who will be there as well.
Yeah, she'll be there, and the dates on it are September 21st to 25th. So it'll be 4 nights, and they're at this remarkable hot springs resort. I mean, that alone is worth going there. I mean, then there's a stone circle, then there's the night sky, then there's shamanic astrology, then there's ceremony, then there's classes. But the hot water itself is amazing. It may be my favorite hot springs place in the whole country. But there's this phenomena that's really intriguing, which is one of the biggest differences between the way ancient people saw the sky and how the astrological and astronomical traditions saw the sky and how the modern astronomers do. So what's happened is that since about 1930, they divided the sky up. They kind of chopped it into 88 sections, and it completely separated themselves from the ancient tradition, which was to honor what they called unformed stars, empty space between the constellational groups. Well, it turns out that during this whole time period that Mars is retrograde in this phase 1 of the new Mars journey, the new Mars synodic cycle, Mars is in what used to be understood as empty space, in between the scales and the head of the scorpion. An extremely significant area because the ancient understanding honored the space between the constellations, which the modern astronomers have completely destroyed that concept of. And I think you would understand this quite well, Brett, being a musician, knowing that the space between things is as important as what you actually hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially as your musicianship matures, really honoring the rests as much as the notes, and then even knowing that notes themselves are created of these frequencies that have rest within them.
When you look at Mars in the sky now, as it goes back behind, when it retrogrades behind 2 degrees Sag, it will be entering into this area of empty space, the unformed stars, the area that's to me much more mysterious, of pure potentiality, that was basically where most of this retrograde loop is going to be operating out of. And that's one of the main features we're getting into in looking at the Mars synodic cycle. And with Mars being in opposition here coming up in a couple of weeks, then we're looking at the beginning of a whole new Mars journey, emphasizing the sign of Sagittarius. But I just love the idea that it's being informed at this point of its journey, which is birth and early, the first couple of years of life, and during its time period of being nurtured in its early years, it's actually in this zone of the sky, which is the unformed stars area, receiving input from really a field of all possibilities. So I love that image. Hang out with it under the sky. Watch Mars in this empty space in between the scorpion and the scales, and try to get some transmissions yourself regarding it.
Yeah, and at a time where Mars retrograde means that we are as close to Mars as we get, right? So this is really a wonderful time to say hello, tap in, open your ears, and see what Mars has to say, and don't just run in fear because he's red, and what we've been told about him for maybe too long, or maybe what we've been told about her, right? So Mars has a lot to say when we tune in and listen, and some amazing energy, and right now close and bright and red, and it's been wonderful to watch.
And then actually on May 30th is when it's closest, and the astronomers are still not sure. They actually say go outside and look. They're not sure, based on certain atmospheric situations with both Jupiter and Mars, they're not quite sure which one will be slightly brighter.
Really?
Technically, they're both going to be minus 2.1 magnitude.
So Mars is going to get as bright as Jupiter?
Yes.
Wow.
And actually, it's in this particular opposition that it can get as bright as Jupiter. It's the next one coming up in 2 years that it's when it gets brighter than Jupiter.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to see that, because that's not something I've even seen, or at least noticed when I did. So, yeah, and that's just, again, me giving my gratitude to you, Daniel, and to the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School for, I think, tuning my eyes to the sky, because I've always looked up, and now it's such a beautiful thing to be in relationship to what I'm seeing, and I have a lot of gratitude about that, and it's my prayer and my devotion, as it's been for Daniel's for a long time, just to remind us all that it's a beautiful world up there, so with our feet on the earth, looking up to the heavens, and reconnecting that marriage of the above and below.
Fabulous. Thank you, Brett. You definitely are the aliveness and the spirit and the soul of what a shamanic astrologer can be. So let's keep the dreams alive and participate in the unfoldment of the one reality.
All right, well, safe travels back into the country lands, Daniel, and I look forward to when we catch up again. And everyone, thank you for watching / listening our short episode today. We will see you in space.
All right.